I'm Tim Bradner. Welcome to Capitol Views. We're here with Robbie Graham, Assistant Commissioner of the Department of Commerce, Community, and Economic Development. I got that right.
Very good.
Thanks for joining us, Robbie.
My pleasure.
You're Assistant Commissioner. You have a lot in your portfolio, and as I understand, you're recently doing some work on Arctic matters.
Yes.
Could you tell us a little about it?
Be happy to. The Department of Commerce is very involved in all issues pertaining to Arctic development, and certainly we work very closely with our fellow travelers in the Department of Transportation and the work that they're doing on studying a deep draft Arctic port we were involved in. That work and continue to be so. In our own department, we're involved from several fronts. One, the work that AIDA, the Alaska Industrial Development and Export Authority, is doing on developing infrastructure in communities around the Arctic. And the project that I'm most closely aligned with is a study that we are doing in concert with the University of Alaska Fairbanks, looking at future economic development potential in the Arctic. So it's a wide-ranging study that kicked off in November when we did a symposium with the Norwegians looking at shipping routes through the Northern Sea Route. And it entails everything from safe, reliable shipping to how we take advantage of energy shipments that in the future will be coming through the Arctic, to transshipment hubs and the jobs that will be created as a result of Arctic development. And that may mean investing in building icebreakers in Alaska. It may mean developing roads and ports along the western coast and any number of applications. So it's an exciting study. We hope to be done with a draft by June, we're thinking, and then the final piece by fall of 2014.
Well, that's something to look for. And as I understand, the Coast Guard is also working with DOT on the proposed port locations in
Correct.
Western Alaska. They've selected 3, as I understand.
That's my understanding.
And that report, I guess their recommendations are due about the same time.
The initial recommendation, my understanding, would be sooner than that. They were even looking at March or April of this year. But needless to say, it's an important piece of the Arctic infrastructure and how we'll be looking to develop in the future.
Yeah, and I think one thing that concerns people is just how these projects are going to be funded. And I think increasingly we hear talk of a 3-part funding. You know, there might be state involvement, concern about how much federal funding there might be, possible private investment could be involved. And so I imagine your department would be the funnel for the state sector of this potential funding for this infrastructure.
It's possible. I think that depending on what the project is, and as you know, we've been very active in promoting the construction of icebreakers by the Coast Guard, and that's a federal budget priority, or we're hoping it will become a bigger priority. Private equity investors also are looking at developing and investing in Arctic projects, but it really depends on the source of the funding and what the project is for.
Robbie, another project that I've heard that you're involved in is the Broadband Task Force and trying to get more internet connectivity out to rural Alaska. What's the status of that?
Well, certainly as it relates to the Arctic, and I'll talk about the study in a moment, broadband is also critically important to everything that's happening in the Arctic, from communications to how we all communicate with each other. So the Arctic is a big piece of that. With regard to the Broadband Task Force, it was established about 3 years ago, 22 members from a wide range of user groups, everyone from the internet providers themselves, GCI, AT&T, ACS, to the School Board Association, universities, Alaska Federation of Natives, and we came together on a monthly basis to really study the infrastructure that exists in Alaska currently with regard to broadband, and that would be, you might hear it commonly referred to as middle mile, the backbone of our fiber that runs either undersea cable or underground, to the last mile portion, and that's the segment that leaves the backbone and comes into the community. So what we found was certainly important, and we've mapped everything in the state, which can be found at akbroadbandtaskforce.com, mapping there that shows what Alaska looks like and what it will take, not only from an infrastructure standpoint, but from a dollar standpoint as well, to build out our complete broadband infrastructure.
Is there a figure, a dollar figure?
There is a dollar figure. It's at the moment about $1 billion. If we were to do everything, and I should predicate that by saying that's based on providing 100 megabits per second to every Alaska household by 2020, which is a decent speed, and certainly speeds and the availability to deliver will only increase as we go forward, which means it might become less expensive. It's hard to know, but that's the dollar amount, with no particular emphasis on who pays that bill. It's not a state responsibility, it's not a private sector responsibility. We were just looking at the cost, understanding that no one entity will be writing a check for $1 billion.
$1 billion, you know, so many billions of dollars projects being talked about these days. It seems
Indeed.
like $1 billion that isn't that much anymore.
Well, it certainly is a major piece of our state's infrastructure, and as we look towards economic development all across the state, we know that to be competitive in the global economy, we are going to need access to high-speed broadband.
Well, Robbie, thank you for being with us.
My pleasure.
Tim Bradner, Capitol Views, thank you for joining us.